yeah, just to mention as people join, I'll mention it a few times in the next couple of minutes, just so everybody's aware that we are recording the session and will be available afterwards on YouTube. So just to make sure everybody is aware and happy with that. And we normally sort of give 2 minutes at the start where I sort of ramble uncomfortably and look a bit awkward, and then I'll do a brief introduction, and we've got a really fantastic array of speakers today, and our fantastic host Navi will take you through the process. So I'll just do a little bit of time filling and rambling until we get to probably another minute or so, and then we'll get cracking. And just to remind you again, we are recording. We won't wait too long to give everyone a chance to join. Okay, going to give 1 more minute, and then I will do my bit, which is just a brief introduction about the Anti-Stigma Network. Then I'll hand over to Navi and our panel. And once again, welcome to everybody joining us. So, okay, 12:33. I think what I might do is make a start. And once again, just to remind you, the session is being recorded. Will be available on YouTube afterwards. My name is Jim. I'm going to do you a brief introduction about the Anti-Stigma Network and hand over to Navi, who you can also see on the screen. So, who are the Anti-Stigma Network? Well, having said welcome to our session, I just want to briefly explain a little bit about the Anti-Stigma Network. So the Anti-Stigma Network is an entirely voluntary consortium of people that come together with an aim to improve the understanding of stigma and discrimination experienced by all people affected by drug and alcohol use. It's a group that's been created through organisations with a shared mission. We aim to help coordinate and amplify the huge variety of existing anti-stigma work across the UK and maximise our shared efforts and learning to take action to end stigma. We have a broad membership of people from many backgrounds and professions, including representatives from local and national government, charities, treatment providers, universities, education, retail, healthcare workers, medical professionals, individuals with lived and living experience across those professions, and many more. We have over 1,000 members and more than 20 organisational members, representing over 10,000 people. It's free to join, so please do join. You can go to the website. It's really easy to sign up. There's no cost whatsoever. You get access to lots of free resources and insights, monthly newsletter, and look out for our webinars. You're obviously aware of this one. Look out for other upcoming events. And yeah, please join us as we come together and share experiences, ideas, practice about how we dismantle and deconstruct structural societal stigma and negative attitudes. And finally, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's joined today. I want to say thank you to our speakers today for their time. And I do think this will be a really interesting session. I really hope you enjoy it. And I'm going to hand over. I'm going to do a brief introduction actually for our host before I hand over. So I'm going to hand over to our host, Navi, who is the founder of No More Pretending, a non-profit think tank and alcohol recovery advocacy group representing the voices of the Punjabi communities and tackling the impact of alcohol in Punjabi communities. And you can find Navi at No More Pretending on LinkedIn and on Instagram. I'm sure he can tell you more about that as I hand over to him now.
Thanks, Jim. Can you hear me? Brilliant. No, thank you for that kind introduction, and a big thank you to the Anti-Stigma Network for asking me to do this. Big part of my work is always trying to get South Asian and marginalized communities a seat at the table. So it's always nice when an organization asks for us to kind of come and share our experiences. And today, you know, we've got a great range of panelists that can share from such a wide variety of angles, because when we talk about stigma, shame, things like this, it's such a complex area that what we need to really do is look at it from multiple perspectives and kind of come to a joint understanding of it. You know, no one person has that full view of it. And as Jim mentioned, you know, my background, my lived experience is alcohol recovery. So I'm a recovering alcoholic. I got sober through a 12-step fellowship. And over the last couple of years, a lot of my time has been spent on improving the cultural literacy of that organization and helping them improve their touch points with not only South Asian communities, but, you know, any kind of migrant community. And, you know, for me, it's been really interesting because my work beyond that was where No More Pretending really kind of came from. It was about how I could work with other organizations to help them better link with other communities. So when we talk about stigma, certainly from my experience, it's always a very interesting topic in that what you see across all the modalities of kind of addiction recovery is that people from a South Asian community are vastly underrepresented. And a lot of times that underrepresentation is characterized by, you know, we're characterized as a hard to reach community. And it's often, you know, a shallow analysis of us as a community to say, oh, there's a lot of shame and stigma in that community. Whereas the truth of the matter is shame and stigma are universal. You know, shame and stigma is universal in addiction across any culture community. And, you know, what I try kind of bring across is that being South Asian, I come from a background where we have a community-based structure. And when you come from a different structure, it drives different thoughts and beliefs. So it's not to say that we don't have shame and stigma. We certainly do, but we certainly have a very different relationship to shame and stigma as to, you know, our European brothers and sisters. And if you don't understand that, it can be very challenging. So I try to work with a lot of organizations and move away from that language of hard to reach communities, because I do a lot of work in the community and there's so many families and people crying out for help. And when I ask them, they say they're very hard to reach services. And also kind of using that language of hard to reach community, it almost puts the onus on us, as in, oh, that community is not doing something. And I understand from, you know, the NHS and all the great public services that are out there that they all have an open door policy. And, you know, there's this idea of equality, you know, them doors are open and everybody can just walk through them. But what we need to realize is that there are a number of cultural barriers in front of them doors which can stop people from certain communities coming in. So a lot of my work is it's what I like to say is it's about recovery equity. It's about meeting people where they are rather than kind of trying to do a one solution fits all. And it's about changing that model from what's the matter with you to what matters to you, you know, really understanding a person's context and their lived experience, because if you don't understand me, how can you help me? But that was just a bit of preamble I wanted to give, and I wanted to frame, and that's specifically, you know, because this is such a complex area, that is my specific view from an alcohol perspective, from a South Asian perspective. And what you may find is others in the South Asian community who have different issues might have a different relationship with that. But, you know, we've got 4 great panelists today, and I'm really excited to kind of hear some of their stories as well. So without kind of further ado, I'll start by handing it over to Ann Marie Sweeney. So Ann Marie is from the Traveller community and was recently a winner of the Intersectionality at the Travellers Pride Awards in 2024. She has lived experience of addiction, and she's now going to share a little about her journey on that. Ann Marie, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I'm Ann Marie. Thanks again for asking me to come on as a traveller woman. That my experience, and I hope it benefits. As a traveller woman in Ireland, and I did live in England for about 20 years, but I came back to Ireland about 14 years ago. And when I landed to my community as a traveller woman, obviously I had to battle with shame and guilt, and I didn't really know at that stage the extent of it until I landed back home, and I landed to my community as the only traveller woman that they knew of that was on serious drugs. And And so I brought my kids back from England and I landed home. And I thought that, addiction at this stage had robbed me out of it had robbed me out of my peace, and it had robbed me out of my self-worth, and it had robbed me out of everything and my morals that I was brought up in. And I didn't quite understand. I was very young and very naive, and by the time I fell into addiction, I had come from a lot of trauma and didn't understand. And so by the time I landed home to Ireland, it was just like I was landed in the middle of all my community, and my community didn't understand. We're talking 14 years ago. They didn't kind of understand how to deal with it, and I didn't kind of understand what I was dealing with. But I felt very, very much ashamed. And I know my kids. I put my kids in the same situation, and it was like I felt like an outsider. In our community, as a traveling woman, a woman always has to hold the home together, and it's upon us to always be strong. And so for to have a woman that's in the traveling community, in my community, on drugs, the community just didn't know how to deal with it. And looking back, I can understand why. So the barriers I had to face within my own community, and then be able to ask for help. I mean, you had to worry there. You know what I mean? You're going to ask a community of set of people to ask for help. You're going to go out there on a limb and you're going to go out and ask for help. I didn't even know how to ask for help. It's not something I was used to. I didn't even know what I was dealing with addiction. And by the time I did ask for help, I was going into a situation where a system had let me down for so many years. When I was growing up, the system itself, the community itself, they didn't accept us very well. We were always seen as, don't go around them. They're not good enough. They're dirty, and they're not people you'd want to be mixing with. So and I grew up with that within myself, that I was never going to be good enough. But by the time I come back to Ireland, a couple of years afterwards, after being in addiction in Ireland, I've thought by moving to Ireland that addiction was going to end, but it didn't. I ended up inside in prison. By that time, I had plenty of trauma, plenty of mental health issues, and my kids and everything was taken off me. And at that stage, by the time I got in to do my sentence, there wasn't very much for me outside the prison walls. The kids had been gone. The one thing I loved more than anything in the world. I did not have an understanding of what I was dealing with and what I was up against. It was a lack of knowledge and the lack of understanding. And by the time I ended up in that prison, I surely wanted to give up. And every time I got outside the prison gates, I always had the best intentions that I was going to go home. I was going to be a good mother. I was going to be a good daughter. I was going to be a good sister. My family my family didn't know how to deal with me. They kind of like, they kind of shut me off. It's kind of like, they can only help so far. They could only do so much, but I wasn't willing and I didn't understand. So by that time, but every time I got out to the prison gates, I ended up doing the exact same thing, picking up and using. I done a few stenches in the jail. Kids had been gone. And one day I heard about a treatment center. So I ended up going to treatment anyways. I ended up getting the kids back. I ended up getting a home. I ended up building in relationships, I suppose. And now I'm back in my own community, working for Mine in a traveller project as an outreach worker to help to build the bridges between the travellers and the services, so that we can better get help out there, because it's my community that's out there that's suffering because of the lack of understanding, and the bridges have to be built somewhere, I think, because it's every day we're hearing such one died an overdose, such a fella died down here, 2 young fellas died up there. So I'm seeing I'm seeing it on the ground here, where there's mothers and there's daughters and there's wives losing their family members. And I suppose now I'm given the opportunity to come back in and do a piece of work, and to go back out there and with the understanding that it is possible, and that even through all the shame, both inside my community and both outside, and the struggles you'll have to deal with and face and come up against, I do think there's hope, and that building bridges is about what it's about, and understanding. You can't go into the community there if you don't understand what they're about, and you haven't got an understanding of their culture. And as they say, my needs coming into a service is different. And if I come into a service where my culture is not understood or recognized, I'm not going to go in. I'm not going to ask for help. I'm not going to want to be a part of it, because I want to feel like I want to be treated like everywhere else I've been. So that's why I'm doing this talk today. I'm a bit nervous, to be honest. But today I'm clean, good few years. I've done many talks. I like to share my experience with my own community. I'd like to be an advocate, to be able to talk for people that don't have voices, for women that can't talk, for women that's caught in addiction out there and think there's no hope and that they can't do it. And I get the opportunity to go around the country and do that, which I'm very proud of. And I see the benefits of it. And I'm now working with women that are going through treatment, that are going into day programs. And it's all for the lack of understanding and the lack of barriers to be broken down, so that we as a community can benefit and reap out there, and that we can grow, and that we can look forward to, and we can seek help to our family members in addiction. So for that's why I'm here. But I was a long battle. I had a lot of strength. I think that was still good for me, and I was determined. I am, and I had a bit of faith. So I hope that was helpful to everybody. And I'm just going to leave it there if that's okay. Thank you.
Anne Marie, thank you so much for that. And although you said you were nervous, it didn't seem it at all. You came across brilliantly. And whenever I hear somebody share their experience, I always try to just be present and absorb it. But you probably saw me. I was scribbling away so many notes, and there were so many points that I could relate to myself as well. You talked about that, the perception of yourself within the community. You talked about how, you got to a point where your drinking was beyond your control, and you needed that help. And just, yeah, how can you help me if you don't understand me? They need to understand your culture and stuff like that. And the work that you do today is so important. You talked about that educational piece. And what I found in that space is, it's when we talk about education, it's not about, the mechanics of, oh, if you drink too much, it's dangerous. It's about changing them community attitudes. Because like I said, you come from an Irish background, and as a Punjabi, one way I describe myself as a Punjabi of India, I say, oh, we're the Irish of India. And everyone understands straight away. There's so much synergy between the Punjabi and the Irish, big family. And that's why we get on. Do you know what I mean? And alcohol punctuates a lot of our events. We both come from a community of heavy drinkers, but like you, my drinking stood out in that. But one thing that really touched my heart that you said towards the end was, today you're providing a voice for the voiceless. And there may have been shame and stigma around some of what you did and your journey, but today, you use that history and that past to help others. Yeah, I mean, it's about, these things that we think, oh my God, we want to hide away. And that's such a key part of recovery. They say you're only as sick as your secrets, but, just using your journey so somebody else doesn't have to go where you went, and just hoping that actually you can help somebody before they needed that. It's always like the next
I
generation
guess,
don't have to go as low as us.
yeah, I'm kind of leading, as you say, we're very similar in cultures, but different. And I can't say that drinking was a problem, but I was on all drugs. And I was the first travel woman to be ever known to be on heroin and to ever land in the middle of my community. And you can imagine the shock that was to the system for me and for my family and for the community within itself. Now, years, obviously, things has changed, but to be able to lead the way for other people that's going to come behind me, and to give advice to traveling women, because we don't get a chance. And there's great strength within us. And I suppose being able to help, and as you know, helping seeing another person come through a journey when they think there's no hope, no faith, and they look at you. Because I mean, I remember the day when I looked at a woman and she was clean in front of me. She had a sparkle in her eye, she had a smile in her face, and I was like, I want that. What did she do to get that? How can I get that? And then you share that experience but to be able to come into my own community and be a speaker for them when they can't speak for themselves, the voiceless, it's a great privilege, to be honest.
Oh, that's brilliant. And you certainly have that sparkle in your eye now. Do you know what I mean? And you are that ray of light. And, it's just so great to hear that you're making such a difference in your community. And some of the challenge is always just the awareness, you know, just more people know that there's somebody like yourself that there's there to help and support. Because, you know, you could be doing all this great work and then sometimes, you know, people just don't know that the work's there. But, you know, thanks to
I
opportunities
don't
like this.
I think in a sense, look, I'm working even with services at the moment, and I'm going, and I've even been asked to come and train to do a bit of training, and even with judges and things. It's around putting your own views at the door. And you know, a lot of people can say a lot about discrimination, but sometimes it can be in us without us even knowing it. We can all have a little bit of it in us. We have to leave our biases at the door. And even now today, working with communities out there in services to kind of better equip them with their way of speaking and how they can deal with our community when we land to their front to their door instead of, you know, but we all can be guilty of it. But I think change is possible.
Definitely so. You know, you're a great example of change, of recovery, and then, you know, using that change to change the system and change the lives of other people is fantastic.
Thank
Thank you so much for that. And next on our speaker list, we have, I've had the privilege of hearing Aunee before, so I was really looking forward to hearing this again. And there she is with her bright smile. So Aunee's a public speaker, a life coach, specifically focusing on substance addictions, sexual abuse, and domestic violence within the South Asian community. Aunee, over to you.
Thank you so much, Navi. So yeah, I'm a South Asian woman in recovery from alcohol addiction. And I think the one thing that stands out about my story is that it's virtually unheard of. It's not unheard of because it doesn't happen. I'm a living example that South Asian women do experience addiction off the back of various traumas that I've had. But you don't hear about it because there's such a fear of stigmatization and being stigmatized in my community that people would rather keep quiet, you know, rather than reaching out for help. And I think in order to understand this, we have to, or at least I've tried to understand stigma. What is stigma? Why is there such a fear around stigma? And the reason being is because it's a label, a really negative label with negative connotations that sticks. And it doesn't stick like a post-it note sticks, you know, where over time it loses its adhesive ability and it kind of falls away like it never existed. It sticks like a tattoo tattooed across your head, you know, and not just yourself, of your family too. A label that you didn't consent to, a tattoo you didn't consent to, or sometimes you don't even know that you've been tattooed with this sort of label across your forehead. The only best way I could thought of doing it was sort of like this, you know, like this. So you're literally walking around like this. Sometimes you're aware of this label that you've been given, or sometimes you're not, you know. But that's the hard and fat truth of it. That's why there's such a stuck to my hair then, it's sticking with me, you know, such a fear of stigmatization. And as you said, Navi, you know, within the South Asian community, we are part of the community. You know, that is the way we function. We function as part of a community and a wider society. So when this community and society has decided to label you with this very stigmatizing label, it kind of just encompasses all that you are. All they think that you are is whatever label they've given to you. And as a South Asian woman, and I really related to what Ann Marie said, you know, there's so many expectations of what a South Asian woman should be, her roles, her responsibilities, the way she conducts herself. And being an addict isn't one of them, you know. And there's so much stigma around it because we are meant to be the caregivers. We are meant to be the person that looks after the home, looks after our family, looks after our in-laws, brings up and nurtures children. You know, we should not be going down the line of addiction, yet it happens. And so I think that's the first thing that I wanted to get out there, because when we are given this label, it prevents anyone from knowing who we actually are. They don't get a chance to know who we are because when they see this label, when this label said dirty drunk, they build this picture of who Aunee is based off this label. So now who they think Aunee is based off this label of dirty drunk. They'll never know my personality. They'll never know what I've been through. They'll never know why I turned to addiction because they've just stopped there. They've just stopped at the label. And that is the power that stigma has, you know. And then what goes on to happen within the South Asian community, because we are such a community-based based people, a based ethnic sort of race, is that people start to disassociate themselves from you. You start to become ostracized. You're almost shunned from the community to which you belong. And then you kind of have no belonging, And so now when you see the bigger picture, it's easy to understand why there's such a fear of reaching out for help, because the fear of getting this label and the subsequent I can't even say it, being ostracized from the community which you belong is so strong that you would rather just stay silent, But then, of course, that has its own problems because stigma kills. The longer you stay silent, the more progressive things become, and it kills. Now, I did think to myself, am I just going to come on and am I going to sort of go through my whole story? And I could have done that, but I thought I'd just focus on the areas of my story where stigma played a real big part, and I think I'd begin at the point of when I disclosed I was sexually molested. It's rife. Sexual abuse is rife within the South Asian community. I'm not saying it isn't in others, but as a South Asian woman, it's rife. But you don't hear about it often. And the reason you don't hear about it is because majority of the time it's done by a family member. And in order to preserve this picture perfect image, this need to preserve this picture perfect image within the South Asian community kind of has this very silencing nature. So when I disclosed that I was sexually molested by a close family member, it wasn't that I wasn't believed, I was. But the fear of other people finding out and the subsequent stigma and shame that's associated with that made my family almost silence me. So I was told, we believe you, but you mustn't say anything to anybody. Nobody must find out about this. And that had such a negative effect on me because it kind of got to a point where I was almost made to feel like I'd been one that had done something wrong. And the perpetrator, the person that had molested me, it was almost like he'd done nothing, And it wasn't that my family didn't want to do anything. But being part of this community and the fear of anyone finding out for the subsequent stigma, and I keep going back to the stigma, meant that this is the way that it was. And so what ended up happening was that I started to blame myself then, and it led to numerous suicide attempts, and mental health problems, and eating disorder, and eventually it led to me wanting to run away from the South Asian community because I just thought, I just can't take this anymore, But because I was already vulnerable, it led me into a situation in which I entered a very toxic relationship, and had I not had the trauma that I'd had, I probably would never have gone down that line. But my need to escape was so strong that I took any route, and this was my exit out, and being very vulnerable, I was able to be manipulated. And that turned out to be a very domestically violent relationship. Another situation in which stigma plays a massive part. People, are in abusive relationships across the board in my within the community I come from, but they don't speak out because it's so stigmatized, and these are almost subjects that have become taboo now. Sexual abuse is a taboo subject, domestic violence is a taboo subject. And then subsequent to that, because I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel heard, I felt ashamed, I started to self-stigmatize. I wanted to escape. And I'd been able to use alcohol quite responsibly beforehand. So it wasn't something that was new to me, but I knew that it had the ability to sort of numb me, take me to a place where I didn't have to feel, I didn't have to think, I didn't have to belong, I didn't have to, keep on self-stigmatizing and build this self-hatred for myself and life anymore. So I kind of started using alcohol as a self-medicating tool. And that quickly progressed into an addiction again. Another taboo subject in my community. Something that's utterly stigmatized, especially being a woman, and I'm a mother. I've got 3 children, and I remember my parents initially, they were really trying to keep it quiet. So almost downplaying my addiction and sort of allowing themselves to believe it was a phase that I was going through. It was, something that I would snap out of. And then as it progressed, it was like, Aunee, why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you doing this? Like, people are talking about you, because of course I was a non-functioning alcoholic. So people were seeing me collapse out on the driveway, You know, people were hearing about the fact that I'd been picked up by the police in the park. There'd be police at my door, social services at my door, you know. And at this point, I was living with my parents because I'd left the domestically violent relationship. But as you know, when you're in a DV relationship, you don't have to actually be in the vicinity of that person for them to have that hold on you, and it was like a toxic mess. And my parents are both teachers, so they had very professional jobs. And they really felt like I was doing this to them, why are you doing this to us? People are talking about us, They didn't really realize that I was dying because their need to preserve this picture perfect image, their fear of stigmatization prevented them from seeing the reality of the situation. They were so fixated on preserving this image for fear of how they'd be seen in the wider community, what people would be saying, that it was almost like the fact that I was dying, because at this stage, my addiction was really bad. They were kind of blindsided to that, Thankfully, in my case, after my first seizure, my parents realized that actually I'm dying, and there was a stage where I was given 12 months to live, and the focus changed. The focus changed then. And my parents were really seeing that we need to do something before we lose our daughter, and I'm forever grateful for that, because if it wasn't for that, then I'd be dead now, But thankfully, they reached out for help. I went on to a residential rehab, a trauma-informed rehab, because of course, addiction is always a secondary problem to a primary issue, and the primary issue usually stems from trauma, which was the case for me. And then after coming out of rehab, I went on to, accomplish my dreams, really. I had a dream of graduating, so I went on to complete my bachelor's, my master's, and so on and so forth. But the issue still was that I still had this label looming across my head. So it didn't matter that I'd come into recovery. It didn't matter that I'd changed my whole life around. Within the South Asian community, I was still that alcoholic. My parents were still the parents of that alcoholic. And the word alcoholic has negative connotations all around, And so since coming into recovery, I've worked really hard to challenge those stigmas and taboos, by sharing my story openly and owning it. And I'm not going to lie to you, initially, when I first did, and I remember my first interview it was quite public with the Sikh Recovery Network, the phone calls to my house was unreal. How could Aunee do this? How could she air our dirty laundry? And my mum at first was like, Aunee, you shouldn't have done that. And I said to my mum, stop doing to me what you did to me before. The silencing culture ends now. And so I'm going to carry on. I empathize, but I'm going to carry on speaking. And of course, now they're very used to me sort of speaking about it, and they're very proud of me. And the fact that I've been able to speak about it has almost unchained my parents as well. So now people know that what my parents were actually going through and what they've been through. My mum's actually done a podcast with me. And as far as I'm aware, she's the first South Asian mother that spoke openly about her experience of not only my addiction, but also my trauma. And hopefully we're sort of, I'm hoping that I inspire other people to their own light, and to sort of take away from that shame, that stigma, that label that people give. Sorry about the light going in and out, it's the sunlight, but I hope you can hear me just fine. So, that's my aim. But in terms of what Ann Marie and Navi were saying about, cultural competence is so important. I was doing a training session with Heewr not last year, and I was saying, in order for a service to effectively engage with the community in which they're based, they have to understand that community. They have to understand that there's so much stigma and taboo around these subjects. That's going to be the initial barrier to people reaching out for help. So understanding that allows for a platform in which services are able to go in and educate alongside community leaders, alongside the community. So it's not almost going in saying, you've got a problem and this is what you need to do. It's saying, look, we know that there's this problem, but what can we do together? How can we find a solution together to address this, so that more people reach out for help instead of dying and in silence? Because silence kills, kills, stigma kills, And I almost found that by speaking out, I was able to also be a bridge between my community and the services that are out there to help people going through the certain situations and experiences and struggles that I myself have experienced, But cultural competency, No, I can't talk today. Cultural competency, you know what I mean? And understanding, the different communities from which you want to reach and you want to engage with is so important and it's so effective. And it allows that sort of line of communication in which people reach out for help and ultimately lives are saved. Sorry about my kerfuffling of words. Not normally like me, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Aunee. You have such not just a powerful story, but the way you're able to articulate it and really bring it to life, and to be able to share so openly and so vulnerably such a delicate topic is amazing. And you talked about wanting to inspire others. I could, I know, within my network, I know people you've inspired, just hearing you speak and stuff like that, and just being that example. And, I was really happy to see your name on here, because it's a really interesting thing when we talk about shame, because we're both from the same community, but it's almost like we're poles apart. As a male, from our community, my experience, the expectations, the views of me as a drinker, opposed to the views of you as a mum, as a female, are completely different. And you were talking about cultural competency. Well, once you got the words out, you were talking about cultural competency. But it just shows, to understand the layers of complexities just within our community. Not only are we come from a community-based structure, our community is very hierarchical. So there's mum and dad, and there's that generation above. Respect isn't earned, it's inherited. So like, me just being an age younger than anyone, it's just, all right, no, you always have to respect your elders. And then another dimension to that is we're very patriarchal, it's a very male dominant culture in terms of the views of the male. And, without understanding any of that, how could you get the help that you needed? Yeah, I mean, it's so challenging. And thankfully you did, and thankfully you're so vocal about it. And you talked about your mum's initial reaction, and at the time it probably hurt a lot, but I suppose once you've had distance from it, you just see it's her thinking she's protecting you, but over time she's come to go, actually, no. And is that light that we need within the community to shine, and to realize that there is so much behind the curtain that we need to address. And it's not to say like different community structures are wrong. Like, yeah, we do come from a community structure where the needs of the whole sometimes or outweigh the needs of the individual, but that doesn't mean that when it comes to things like this, we should hide them. It's almost a misinterpretation of what we're about. And yeah, it's just great to see you. It's great to see you smiling away and just sharing like you do, and just using your experience not only to help others directly, but like you said, educate other services. Nobody can do this alone. We do this together. Yeah, and that's what we need. You provide such an important insight into, into the community, and that kind of fostered with other viewpoints, we can start to build a rich picture. And one thing I always say around this is that actually we're kind of in the infancy of this journey. Do we actually understand the problem itself? We always kind of rush to want to put the solutions together. But I think it's about having roundtable discussions like this to just understand what the problem is. Because once you understand the problem, we can really start to put some innovative ideas together to how we address it. But like Ann Marie before you, your guys' work is so important, and just giving that voice to the voiceless, and not just the voiceless, just for some people, some of these behaviors are so normalized. Just hearing you going, well, actually, some of this stuff isn't right, because like there's different shades of what happened to you is there's extremities of that, but none of it's right. And how can we change that? How can we change these community attitudes? And it all starts with you speaking out, irrespective of what people might say, just letting people know this was my experience, and recovery is possible no matter what you've gone through. And I've had the privilege of hearing a more detailed version of your journey, and it was harrowing, because for me, I look on the screen, I see a sister, a cousin. Do you know what I mean? You look like one of my own, and to hear that journey, and you just think, oh my God, it's just crazy. But thank you again for that, and thank you for sharing
No,
your
thank you
story.
so much, Navi. I think for me, I decided to stop running. I spent so long running from the South Asian community, and it was almost like, okay, now I'm going to address the very things that made me run. I'm going to educate myself in the source of this. And like you said, it's, a lot of it's inherited stigma, inherited respect. And I'm going to educate the community, take the anger away, because initially it was anger, how could you do this? But then I thought, no, this is not the way to go forward. The way I'm going to go forward is understanding and then educating through my understanding, sharing my journey. And it's worked very, very well, to be honest with you. And recovery is phenomenal. I mean, my partner passed away last year, and just the tools that I've gained in recovery have enabled me to navigate it in such a graceful way in which I haven't self-destructed. I've almost carried on my journey, making myself, my family, and Rico proud. So yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, I was really sorry to hear about your
Thank
partner,
you.
and just your ability, like you said, just to navigate something like that just pays testament to your recovery, to your ability to kind of be able to feel them feelings and navigate a space that I can't even imagine. I can't even bring to, but it just, for me, you do have so much pride in your work because it's making such an impact within our community, and that's what we do. You foster your own back garden, you do the work where you understand. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Just was there any final words from yourself?
No, I just wanted to say that I love the fact that stigma is being addressed, and throughout having people from South Asian community, men, women, different communities, and just being talked about. Like you said, the only way that these things can be actually challenged, educated on, is through having these open discussions. And so I'm very thankful to be invited along and taken part in this. So thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah, and like you just said, obviously we've talked about our own background, which is South Asian, but it shines a light on the complexities of any other community that actually, once you start to look into it, there's so many nuances, and on the whole, we may have more in common than we have different, but we can't trivialize the impact of the differences, and it's these small nuances that we need to understand. And for me, I think there's a real unique phenomenon to migrant community. So I tend to use the language of migrant community because if you look at like the likes of not just South Asian migration, but Irish migration and Eastern European migration, you see that there are spikes in addiction and mental health issues as people try and navigate their identity. You have this cultural heritage and you have this kind of newfound British nationality, and they don't always go together. And that's one thing I struggled kind of growing up understanding who I was. I was never quite English, and I was never Indian enough. I came up in the north, and there wasn't a huge community, so it was navigating that space. And I think that happens a lot in migrant communities, and that's where we see people struggling with that sense of who they are, and mental health challenges, and then obviously addiction issues, and then services that may not necessarily understand their unique needs, and that's what this work's all about. So yeah, speaking of different communities as well. So next we have Heewr. Hopefully I've pronounced his name. We've tried various different ones, but the note I've got phonetically is Heewr. So hopefully I've done that justice to your name. But through his personal and professional experiences, he's committed to advocating for refugees, asylum seekers, and marginalized ethnic communities. He strives to continue to work towards creating a more inclusive and supportive environment for these individuals, empowering them to overcome barriers and achieve their potential. Heewr, over to yourself.
Thank you very much, Navi. I am really happy that I attend this session, and all of you, Navi, Aunee, Animara, you should be proud by yourself, and for the community, we are all learning from you, and you are now the teachers, you are now the best support workers can help all your community. I am talking maybe different from you, colleagues. I born in Iraq, in Kurdistan, which is Kurdistan, it's 4 parts: South Turkey, North Iraq, East Iran, East Syria, West Iran. And if you see the whole Middle East, about the addiction and why people will become to addict to the alcohol first, and the fashion of addiction of drugs, it is new in Middle East. Maybe it's a long time ago has been happening in Europe or in USA, but comparing to Middle East, it's new. So if you see the area of Middle East, it is always a war and conflict in this area, which is that's causing the huge and wide mental health traumatic issue. We know what will happen and what will happen in the war zones. If you go back to see the conflict in between Israel and Palestine, and then if you see the Iraq problem and the war, also if you see Iraq-Iran war, and Syria with the Palestine, Syria with the Israel war, and recently all you aware about Syrian war again, and it was between they have been supported by Turkey against the Bashar al-Assad, which is he moved and he went, but they found it, he left a huge amount of Captagon drugs. I will share the links later and I will come to explain step by steps. So all this war, I mentioned it is affecting every single person in the communities. Doesn't matter about, because it is huge and very wide diversity for the religions, for the nationalities, and it's always making conflict between these between them. It will happen. So it will causing the mental health, and unfortunately, it is a stigma. Mental health long time has been diagnosed or known as it is a stigma from the communities. I mention all the communities. Doesn't matter Arab, Kurd, Turks, Persian, Afghanis. All they have got stigma from the mental health, and which is that taken the people have been victimized for 2 types. One of them, it is addiction for the alcohol. Another one, will be a victim for black magic or spiritual witchcraft, which is it will lead it from the religious side. So if someone has got a mental health, is going to have got a treatment from, as I explained it, from witchcraft, which is they will say this person has got evil spirit in his brain or in his thought. And then we know it is illegal, but still it will carry on in the Middle East area. So many people will be victimized, and some of them, they will losing their life. Others, they will be victim for alcohol, and they will be depend of the alcohol, and they will become alcoholic. But they don't mention that they are alcoholic because of this sadness or of this mental health from the tragedy or from the trauma of the wars, or the squeezing all the wars situation will be bring it to the community. So most the traditional drinking in the Middle East, it will be with maza and singing. Also, they will make a traditional that they will be happy. If you drink, if you ask them why you want to drink, you say, I want to be happy. So why you want to be happy with the alcohol? Why you cannot change it to be happy without alcohol? So that is here the question. So always when I graduated from the sociology university and then I become teacher of psychology, I was doing awarenesses and workshops to people will be have not stigma for their mental health, to they not rely on others, like I said, black magic or witchcraft and alcohol. Unfortunately, it is no any support from the governments, which is if you go to visit any mental health hospitals from all the countries in Middle East, you don't find a hospital will be standard hospital like in Europe or in UK or in USA they have. It is nothing there. Yes, they have good doctors of the mental health, but it is not a standard and it is not funded from the government side. So people, they still don't admit it that they have got mental health, and from this mental health, they have been diagnosed as alcoholic. If you see another side from it, as I mentioned recently, government like Bashar Assad, he was producing the Captagon tablets to make his country and his community to be addicted. As we know, the consequence of the side effects of the Captagon make people happy and will be awake always, that they're not feeling tired. So he used to use that even for his soldiers. What I want to mention, after my journey, I live in UK since 2002. I have always been advised and supported people from variety communities in Middle East to tell them, please, here is United Kingdom, it is not Middle East. All the supports from rehab center for the mental health, for the to get treatment if you are addicted to the alcohol or drugs, please get help and shout, say, I need help, I'm addicted, which is that will be helping yourself, helping your family, and also save you from all this journey have you passed as a refugee and asylum seekers, from the victim of trafficking to rebuild new life in UK. So that is, I would like answer questions if you have got any questions, but that is very short describing of the Middle East and the situation, how the people will be victim of addiction of alcohol and drugs. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And you raised such an interesting point about the stigma of mental health and the interpretation of black magic in some cultures. And that, you know, that you hear about this a lot, and it comes down to an educational piece around that lack of understanding around mental health. You know, when someone's ill, you know, it can be diagnosed as these other things as well. And that's certainly some things that I've heard within my community as well, you know, especially around South Asia, that tends to be something as well. You hear about, you know, Neza and evil spirits and so forth. And, you know, people's ailments can be attributed to that. And for me, it's not to have an opinion on people's belief, but obviously the challenge is when it becomes a barrier to people getting help. You know, like it's what route do people go down when people feel that actually the cause of this is something like this? And the other point you were making around actually, you know, I've talked about migrating communities. Obviously, there's the you know, from a migration perspective, that there's a conscious choice, but like you said, where there's conflict and war-torn areas, you know, people where they're forced to relocate, and the impact that has on somebody, you know, on their day-to-day life, having forcibly have to move from their home, you know, because your home is always your safe space. Then imagine, you know, conflict arises, and then you involuntarily have to move. So it's fantastic to hear the work that you do with people that are being moved from areas like that, and providing them with the support and the help that they need. Because from just kind of a cursory look at the data, you do see that the effects of mental health in use cases like that is astronomical, you know. And you know, the services like this need to have that understanding, not only of the community, but the delicacies of what they're dealing with, and that experience. And thank you for the work you're doing to help them people. That's fantastic. You talked about questions. I think we've got a question and answer session at the end. So what we'll do is we'll go through the speakers, and then we've set aside some time. So
one things I suggest, to be honest, because I am working with the variety communities in Wales, I will suggest please make some flyers, leaflets in all different languages, and distribute them between them, that the help is available. Because you don't believe how many people they are uneducated in English language, so they know only their languages. So that's very important. These flyers and leaflets will be getting hands in the communities too. They will be have regarding anti-stigma, they will be have good support, and explain for them the support is available in this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 these organizations. Because especially the new generation, if you see the side of addiction, it is, if we come on it, it's not only alcohol and drugs. The new model is phones, tablets. So those people, they will be getting lonely. Okay, so through these items, they will be getting addicted through the alcohol and the drugs. Don't forget, the media as well has got big affecting on the alcohol, because they will do advertising for the price that is the cheaper, that is the offer. So hopefully in future you try, as your organization, you try to change the policy of UK, stop doing advertisement for alcohol. Now how they stop it for the cigarette, hopefully they will stop it for the alcohol as well. Thank you very much.
There's a great point around language. A question on that. Do you find that that's quite a barrier in the work that you do with the people that you work with?
Yes, actually, they don't understand English. They don't. We have good people. I can get you the hundreds of people. Even they speak their own languages, but they don't read it. For example, the recent Syrian refugees, okay, the Kurdish Syrian refugees, they don't know how to read their language. Only they know Arabic, because they have not been studied in the school. They were not allowed to study in the school their own language, but they can speak it. So imagine if you have got, especially for the schools, for the the ESOL language classes, which is they will be learning basic of the English. It is very important these awarenesses could be in media in their own languages, even if they cannot read and write. Okay, they can hear it. So the advice will be passed to the whole community. You have got I don't want to mention the different languages because we are not here for
No,
that.
I get exactly what
Yeah,
you're saying, but what you're saying is
but
two parts to it. There's a
yeah,
language part, but then there's also the medium of communication. So it's not just about written language, it's about having video and audio for people that may not be able to read.
that's what
That's really true.
I mention, and it is very important through the social media. That will be passed to all the communities. They will get this information. Please stop stigma. Shout, I need help. Because it is very, very important to stop the generations and new generation as well from all these consequences, which is affecting the communities from addiction of alcohol and drugs.
Thank you so much. Apologies, just in the interest of time. So just a quick note. So we do have a question and answer session at the end, and people can submit questions, I believe, on the chat. For any questions that we don't get to cover in the session, they will be available on the Anti-Stigma Network website as well, and the social. So we will do our best to make sure that all questions are addressed. But thank you so much for that. Next, we have Stella. So a quick introduction on Stella. So Stella currently works at Your Place. She's a development specialist, coach, speaker, and group facilitator. She helps people to live authentically by design, not by default. She has experience working with homelessness, youth work, domestic abuse, people who use drugs, mental health, sex work, and offending. So over to you, Stella.
Thank you so much, Navi. It's been absolutely wonderful to listen to all the other guest speakers. What I'm going to try and do is just share my screen right now, so hopefully that works okay. And I can just have a little bit of a discussion around what I do and my experiences in a variety of aspects of working specifically with women who have experienced addiction. So currently where I am at the moment, I work in a supported housing service, which is based in Newham. And that service itself, sorry, just double checking, can you actually see my screen?
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so I'm a women's development specialist and I'm based in Newham. And the service that I currently am in is a 150-bed service. We have a mixed gender, and with over, I'd say, 80% of the take-up of the service being male, and around a small amount of that being women, which I'd say roughly 30 to 40 of those people are women. We are based in Newham, which is an area which has a lot of homelessness. So my experience specifically has been working with women to basically make sure that the service that they receive is adequate to them. Now, within everything that I've been doing with women and the experiences that I had with them, it's been able to give me an opportunity to see how different services worked. So because I'm currently in supported housing at the moment, I'm able to have that insight in terms of seeing women in a service aspect. Over my working career, I've been able to do outreach service as well, based in Brixton, Lambeth, and that's specifically working with sex workers. And I'd actually honestly say that working with that client group has been able to enlighten me. And I've learned more from that client group than I've ever learned from any training session, any type of book that I could pick up. I've really got most of my understanding on compassion, on how to actually work and relate with people who have those specific needs. And I've been able to also see the extreme stigma that people face. So within my service now, we have a large migrant community. We also have women that have been impacted highly by sexual violence. They've also been impacted by mental health and severe trauma, along with domestic abuse. And a large amount of these women do not have any support networks whatsoever. when we think about the homeless sector, we think about so many other underlying support needs that women may need. And we already know that in the homeless sector, that women are not given the adequate support that they're supposed to have. The recording and the numbers and the issue of homelessness within women is underreported, and the services that are currently out there are not adequate for the women and the support needs that they have. So when a woman comes to our service, they have a variety of needs. And as a lot of the speakers mentioned before, understanding these needs are vital in order for us as professionals, as services, to be able to actually give the right support on a personalized level. Stigma and shame lives in the dark, but it creeps out at every opportunity throughout our daily lives. It grows because we fear what we do not know. It becomes like second nature. It can be a look, a comment, behavior that can impact people's lives for eternity. Like some of the speakers mentioned before, the experiences that they have gone through, it has been a journey. And even up until today, you're constantly working on yourself. And this is not just people with drug and alcohol issues. This is just humans as a whole. We become what we are surrounded by, the experiences we go through. So when we see homeless people using drugs on the street, what goes through our minds? We hear of children being removed from mother's care, but what's the first thought? A lot of it is often, oh, they must have been bad mothers. They must have done something really wrong. They don't deserve those children. Stigma is like a silent death, and it slowly kills the hope of those it impacts. But how can we possibly measure the true damage that stigma causes if it's not talked about and if it's not seen as important? When we look at women with multi-needs, there's so many areas, like everybody said, it's so complex. And then you add all of these personal identifying factors that impact women. You'll have one single woman come into a service, but all of these surrounding factors that also impact on a woman. So even from referral point, when you meet a woman, just the way a referral form is done can affect the service that she receives. There's been cases where you see a really complex referral and it says high risks, and it talks about things that have happened years ago. And those things are still highlighted on risk assessments. And that gives staff within services an impression. And it may not necessarily be an intentional impression from people, but it can become just a picture that you already form in your mind of who an individual is. And how it was previously mentioned, like the label on your head of drunk, or that is on a written document, and it goes through service after service after service, and people are looking at this document and saying, this is who this individual is. So they've got a picture of that person already in their mind without even meeting them. And you add on top of that the relationship that you have to build with people that have been through trauma and have addiction issues. And all of this, sexism, racism, the media, disabilities, being a mother. And on top of that, the risks, the safety of being a woman who's homeless and has addiction issues, all have this label that is plastered over women constantly. And this is the environment that people are living in daily, and not just within their own internal basis, but outside of themselves. The people they meet, the society they go through, they're constantly thinking, this is who I am because I have been told this is who I am. This is the label I've been given. And they start to take this on as if this is the only thing that they're going to be. So it leads us to look at the root cause of stigma, the societal attitudes and perceptions that attach these negative beliefs and stereotypes to certain characteristics. We have a fear and ignorance. And when we fear something, what we don't know, we usually, as humans, want to push it far from us. We want to see it as less as possible. And you see this within the homeless sector. If we have homeless people out of the way, then it's not that big of an issue. It's only an issue when we constantly have to see them begging on the street and a woman putting her hand out asking for help, and you feeling guilt as a passerby every time. We almost don't even want to give eye contact to homeless women and people as a whole. We'd rather they're hidden away so we don't have to deal with them, because we are the civilized ones living in communities and going to work. So we are the upstanding citizens, and they are pushed to the darkness, to the corner where they can't speak. They don't feel safe. So it becomes a cultural norms within these migrant communities. We don't want to talk about it. It was mentioned before that within families, we have expectations with Black and brown communities. We're raised in certain ways, and we don't talk about those things. And those people who do use drugs, well, they are seen as the examples. Those are the people you don't want to become like. You don't want to be like your cousin Sandra. Oh no, she's the one that takes drugs. We don't want to even talk about it. We don't want to address it, because it's the shame that builds up, and it reinforces all of these acceptable things. They become normalized, and we lead into the marginalization of those who deviate from these norms. So if you're not seen as the everyday person going to work, and you're seen as those people who drink and have those issues that you can't just get over it, you are seen and alienated. You're kept away. So even the historical prejudice that come with it, it sticks with people. You've got power dynamics of people in professional positions that utilize their positions as power to oversee and make themselves feel better about who they are, because they're the experts coming in to tell these people how they should live their life, when really the experts are them people. The people using drugs, the people going through these are their own experts. We can learn more from you, people with lived experience, than we can any professional out there. So I've emphasized so much on helping women to actually pull back their personal power, understand that their voice is power, and that can really help other people. But on top of that, we see media representation, the pictures, the videos, the images, the comments. We're living in a technical world now where the media is constantly feeding us with these thoughts of how we should view people who use drugs and alcohol. And it's damaging. It continues to be damaging. This slide actually isn't working. I'm not sure where it is, so I'm going to go into the next one. But this was actually around about the internal pressures that professionals face when actually trying to navigate supporting people with drugs and alcohol. Oh, there it is. Okay, so on top of some of the feedback that I've got from professionals and looking at the things that they have to deal with when supporting people who they don't really know much about, they're not aware of the cultural contexts of the issues they support, it brings fear, it brings guilt, anxiety. And imagine this as a professional going in to support someone who also has pretty much all of these same, you know, feelings and notions and thoughts that go through them. So sometimes you have professionals who mean very well, but even their well-being and good intention actually creates even further trauma for the people that they're trying to help. They have a shame and they may not be able to address it because deep down under, they don't agree with the way the person's living. So even then, on top of that, you find that the conversations are hard to be had with professionals themselves, with services, the very people that are supposed to give support to people. And when we're looking at our communications as humans as a whole, we have our 5 senses, and this is used to process data. So we're taking over 2 million pieces of information per second. Within that information, it's absolutely impossible as humans to actually take in everything and process it. This means that as humans, we are constantly filtering down the information that we should actually be aware of when we're dealing and supporting with people who have support needs that we may not understand. We have to think about our values, our beliefs, the decisions, our own memories as well. So even just as humans, we constantly filtering, generalizing, and distorting and deleting information. And as humans, we only take in 5 to 9 chunks of pieces of information. So imagine all of that we have discarded just for our own minds to process what is in front of us. So if we see a woman who's using on the street, our first thought is, oh, that's sad. Oh, that's dangerous. It's risky. She's at risk. But we're cutting down, like that was mentioned before, her past, her history, her trauma, what she's gone to actually lead her to be there using drugs. We have all these notions of you should stop drinking, you should stop smoking. It's not good for you. Of course they know this, but what has led them to actually get to there? What's the internal representation and the system preferences? How are we building up our thoughts on a daily basis of how we view other people? Building up these states, our mindsets of how we view people that use drugs, our own personal opinions. And from that, we create these states, and these states impact the people that come around. And it's not just professionals, it's the communities that we live in. It's the society that we're constantly building because we're not assessing our own selves. It's important that we actually analyze our own thinking. It's up to us to see how it impacts, how our own behavior impacts other people and the environment around us, because our behavior then results in internal and external factors that change constantly. We are all responsible every single day to be part of dismantling systems that make things hard for people to get help. Our unconscious biases. You've all heard of the saying that your energy speaks before you do. So even if you're doing the right thing as a professional, you're filling out the forms, you're doing the work, people can tell if you really don't want to be there. Your authenticity is everything. And one thing about women I work with, they can tell when someone isn't really genuinely caring about them. They're just doing a job to actually do the job and go home. There's no real heart-centeredness from what they're doing as people. People become excluded from the support because they're scared to come into the very services that are supposed to support them. There's not adequate programs in place to give personalized support. It's not a blanket cover that we have to give women and people that use drugs. It's individualized, and we have to accommodate that because we are constantly building a society that is going to break. And it's not just breaking for the people affected by it, it breaks for us as a whole, as a society. The discrimination goes on for years and years. Women may encounter judgmental attitudes from service providers, and they don't want to come. They don't want to talk to you. Just by the way you're looking, you're speaking, you're engaging with them. How can you expect to even connect with a culture you are unaware of if your own body language speaks volumes that you don't want to be there? So we continue to damage the very people we are trying to help by being ignorant ourselves. We need a hard look at ourselves and the systems in place. Services designed for the ideal client often fail real women because we want that ideal client that's going to come through, and then we're going to give them help, and then they're going to come out, and we are going to be the heroes. When no, we shouldn't be the heroes. We should be helping women and people that need support to be the heroes of their own story. So are we creating systems that truly help, or ones that just maintain appearances? And this is the constant things that we come up against. Those reinforced labels of junkie, loser, liar, manipulator, the media and families and friends that get lost in being seen as bad. And that stigma, that mark of disgrace that no longer welcomes these women into the communities is what constantly damages the very people we're trying to help. So why does stigma hurt so much? It's a ripple effect of being othered. It's not just feelings. Stigma isolates, it silences, and it re-traumatizes people. Women internalize their judgments, leading to shame and withdrawal. And we're constantly seeing less and less women coming into services because we're still making the same mistakes as services. And we're not thinking out the box. We're not doing any differently. We need to break the cycles and actually give real human connection, that we're no different from the people we're trying to help. In fact, there's very many similarities to me and the sex workers that I used to work with that stood on the street. Even me trying to help these women, I was stigmatized by being out at 1 o'clock in the morning with these women. As a Black woman, I was treated by police exactly the same way that my clients were met. I was almost arrested because I was standing with a woman of color on the street at 1 o'clock in the morning, and we were deemed to be drug dealers and causing a nuisance on the street. Not that we were just trying to help these women. So it's damaging. It's re-traumatizing. And I want to give a call to action. How do we change this? We start by looking at ourselves, our own beliefs. We reflect on ourselves, how we impact the community, and we start conversations. We can't be scared to speak about it. We have to speak up, because by doing so, we encourage people with lived experience and living experience to come forward, because it's only by hearing your voices that we can actually make a change, that we can actually make impact, that we can actually get people from just giving them information, but to be part of the decision making, to actually give their views. And we design services with them in mind, with their support, with their influence, and not just use them as tokens to actually say, look at us, but actually empower these people and let go of control and allow people with lived and living experience to actually be their heroes and stop implementing and doing what we think they need, but actually allowing them to make their change. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stella. Apologies, I'm just finding a way to come off mute. I knew so little about the topic that you covered. It's unbelievable. Thank you for such a comprehensive overview of that. And you know, comprehensive is the key word. You covered so many areas there, and I think a key question from a lot of people were if the slides are going to be available afterwards. So I know that the webinar is recorded and that'll be available. But yeah, I think a lot of people were asking if the slides would be available. So that's something maybe we can pick up afterwards. But thank you for running us through that. I'd love to be able to go through just the host of notes that I've made, but I'm also aware of the time as well. We've got 5 minutes left, and I know that a lot of people were keen to kind of ask questions and stuff. Looking through the Q&A, obviously there's a variety of questions, which I think the Anti-Stigma Network will work towards getting answers to. But I think one key theme that's kind of come across is how do we actually create cultural competence, and what are some of the good practices that people could share? And in terms of how we do that, maybe if we go through our great panelists in the order that they spoke. So maybe if I pose that question to Ann Marie first in terms of her experience.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think from my experience and from my work experience, I think we have to look at ourselves. Sometimes it could be a system we could have picked up something we didn't even know we had, and be discriminated against people we don't understand, we have it within ourselves. So I think it's looking at ourselves, reflecting on ourselves, and seeing what do we bring to the table. I think is a good.
Brilliant. Aunee?
Working with the community, understanding, like you said, Navi, the community hierarchy. So in the South Asian community, we have community leaders that basically lead the community looks up to. So one thing that I found that works is liaising and engaging with community leaders, working with them to understand the community, and then working with them to develop education that can be filtered down through the community to start normalizing these conversations. If it's done at the head, at the top, then it can be filtered down. Another thing I found is calling in people with lived experience from that community. When I go into places, I'm almost that bridge. I'm coming into your organization, but I'm also part of the South Asian community. I understand my community. I've lived it for the past 40 years, So for me, it's about connection, engagement, actively listening, willing to learn, educate yourself, and then sharing knowledge back and forth to allow that normalization and tackle stigma that ultimately kills.
And you made a great point that Stella, you made that point about the power of lived experience, people that have been through it, that there's such a rich source of data, and they can highlight failings in existing processes. So I think that's a common thing for a lot of people. Is Heewr still with us? Oh, I couldn't see him on the screen. Is Heewr? If Heewr's not available, Stella, same question to yourself around some either best practice or approaches to creating more culturally competent services. Obviously, you did cover such a in-depth as to the issue and start to broach on this subject, but any closing thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's kind of us really services specifically giving up some of our power, releasing that and creating those spaces, and not just using people with experience or living experience to, for annual reports and, tokenistic stuff and to look good, but actually really getting them to be part of the decision making, because I've learned more from people with living and lived experience than I have anywhere else. There's such a wealth of knowledge. You can't get it from, just reading from a book. We have to allow them to be in board meetings. We have to allow them to be part of our policies and procedures. They have to be visibly seen to be part of the process.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think you just opened up such another key area where you talk about the use of people with lived experience and tokenization. But I think that's something for another day. I believe Heewr's joined us again. So Heewr, we're just having some closing thoughts on how to create cultural competency in services and any best practice. I know you said before language was a key one. So, the use of different languages in the medium, but are there any other kind of pointers you could provide?
Thank you very much again. I'm sorry for disruption. I have to change my room. Actually, I'm working with asylum seekers and refugees. They don't know anything about the services available in United Kingdom. And when they come, if you ask them the questions, these services, is it available in your country? None of them available in their country. I just mentioned it, mental health service, which is for doctors, nursing. There is no hospital for mental health. So if someone is suffering from the depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, all this type of mental health, who can help them to get the treatment? So instead of getting health treatment, they will be taking alcohols or another addictions tablets or drugs. So that's how they will be addicted. In UK, when they are coming and they are shouting, oh, I am addicted and I need help, we are asking this question to them because they will facing homelessness, financial problem. For example, they get amount of money which is not covering all their needs. When we ask them question, where do you spend your money? They will say, oh, I'm addicted. So in there, we will refer them to the right organization. So that's why I mentioned it. If it will be video or voice. It will be in their own language, or leaflets, flyers can be advertised and can be available for different languages, even if not refugee and asylum seekers. For someone who came for work in United Kingdom and has to have some knowledge what's available for him, because maybe in their country these services is not available for getting rehab treatment.
Very true. Yeah, just knowing that the services are there and what they can provide. Guys, I wish we could just go on all afternoon, but unfortunately we are at the top of the hour and it's 2 o'clock. So I am mindful of people will have to shortly drop off. But one closing note, it's been such a fantastic session. You panelists are amazing. It's just a drop in the ocean of some of your experiences and some of the great work that you're doing. But, sessions like this are only really possible thanks to, people like the Anti-Stigma Network. But there's a feedback form. If people could feedback, if we are going to do things like this, please help us understand what went well, how we can improve things. So it's really important that we get that feedback. So I think Rob's put a link to it in the chat. So if I could ask everybody if they could just please fill that out so we can understand how we can improve these and kind of keep having sessions like this and kind of disseminating all this key information. But I think the last thing to say is just a huge thank you to all the wonderful panelists. It's been such an insightful session to get so many different viewpoints and just understand the issue from just 4 different viewpoints. Like I've got so many takeaways from this session, and I've no doubt that the attendees themselves have taken a lot away from this. A huge thank you to the facilitators, for everyone that actually made this possible. There's been a lot of work in the background. We've just been here smiling and talking, which a lot of us are great at doing, but in the background, there's been a lot of hard work to make it possible. So a big thank you to everyone, and a huge thank you to the attendees for giving up their time to come listen, and hopefully they've taken away some key items that they can maybe start to action or just start that discussion. But I think I'll hand it over to Jim.
Yeah, can I just say a final, again, thank you again, and just thank you to Navi for your fantastic hosting and kind of framing and responding to some of the real, I think, really meaningful insights. And my final plug, I guess, is for, as you mentioned, feedback, but also if you'd like to join and get involved in the network is just whoever joins it, really. So we welcome everybody, and we hope that across the network we can continue to learn and educate and listen to each other and understand how stigma manifests in so many different ways. The real we've heard today about how stigma kills, and we need to keep talking about it, keep sharing, keep learning. And please do join the network if you're not members. And if you'd like to contribute in any way, get in touch. We're hosting further webinars, events, blogs. We're just keen to keep everybody linked up and amplify all the great work that's going on that we've heard about today. So thank you again to everybody, and thanks for everybody attended. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.